Just a few days ago, it looked as if the stealth bomber was a dead issue. Since then, the Senate voted down attempts to kill the program. It's not the final word, but it does give new hope to the thousands of Texans who work on the B-2 in Grand Prairie. We're told the invasion of Kuwait definitely helped sway the Senate. And some of the folks we talked to at LTV agree.
You sure have to wake up some of the people there. You know, the world isn't the safe place that just because of gladness doesn't mean that we can lay down our arms and not be prepared for something anywhere in the world.
Texas lawmakers say quite candidly the Kuwait crisis couldn't be more timely in terms of their battle to save Texas defense contracts. Senator Phil Gramm puts it this way. He says as we turn our swords into plowshares, we better remember to save a few of those swords. Swords like the F-16 Falcon made by General Dynamics in Fort Worth. Or Bell Helicopter's V-22 Osprey in Arlington. All of these programs mean thousands of local jobs, of course, but more than that, these people believe too many cuts would be
asking for trouble. Definitely is. I mean, that's not just my opinion. I think that's just the way it is.
I think that there's always a place for defense in any country, and I don't think anyone should take it lightly.
Nor will they, at least as long as Iraqi troops are on the march in the Middle East. Ron Trumbla, Texas News 5. At 42, John Windsor is starting over. He's looking for a job at a time when he should be working and planning for retirement, but John has no choice. He worked as a wing mechanic until General Dynamics let him go last May. The layoff caused shock, frustration, and fear.
You don't know what the future holds for you. And it's just like being slapped in the face and say, hey, you got to start all over again, you know, when you thought you had a home.
John Windsor was just one of about 500 employees to get cut in GD's last layoff. Another 650 are scheduled for tomorrow, and that may be just the beginning.
John, you've been working on a resume?
Yes, sir. A friend of mine typed it for me.
This is GD's Career Transition Center. It opened last month to help John and hundreds like him find and land new jobs. A resource library lists jobs in aerospace or other fields in Texas or across the nation. There are experts to help prepare letters or resumes. They can even refer people for retraining, all of which is helpful. But it can't erase the fear and the uncertainty.
It kind of scares you. You've got 20,000 other people to compete with, you know. And when you get up in middle age, like I'm 42, it bothers you. My main fear is, I guess, of losing things I've worked for over the years.
And that's a fear more and more Texans will come to know in the weeks and months ahead. Ron Trumbla, Texas News 5.
Just so we follow it up, as you know...
John Fitzgerald Kennedy's 1,000 days were neither the best nor the worst of times. They were a bit of both. It was a time when the Berlin Wall and the Cuban Missile Crisis brought us to the brink of nuclear war. We held our breath, looked in, and stepped back. In Asia, we seemed to sink deeper into the mire of Vietnam with each passing day. And here at home, our national conscience squirmed under the spotlight of racial bigotry. Through it all, a young, charismatic leader worked to focus our hearts and minds on the future.
I sometimes think we are too much impressed by the clamor of daily events. The newspaper headlines and the television screens give us a short view. Wisdom requires the long view.
And it was that view that sent young American adventurers into space, that led to a limited nuclear test ban treaty with the Soviet Union, that fueled confidence and spurred the economy here at home.
It seems like we live a little bit better then than we do now.
I guess the money pressures weren't as hard. Seems like money's harder now.
Things were going real good in America, and I think Americans felt good about America. And today I'm not sure that sentiment is still present.
And if the times were different then, so were we. We were simpler, less cynical, more hopeful, and
we didn't worry about the environment, about pollution, about diet, about cholesterol, about exercise, about smoking, about drinking, about the safety of cars, about asbestos in school, all the kinds of things that make life such a kind of day-to-day, moment-to-moment nag were not on the minds of Americans in those days.
In the early 60s, we had a lot of things on our minds. They included fast boats, big cars, parades, beauty queens, bathing suits, beach parties, and babies. We liked fashion shows, funny fads, sweaters for two, and McDonald's. We watched the Beverly Hillbillies, listened to Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Beatles were no longer just little bugs you drove around in. Jukeboxes still played 5 songs for a quarter. We twisted the night away, and of course, everything went better with Coke.
It just seemed like a slower pace of life. I think things were a little better back then. They were a little simpler.
During the Kennedy years, we still had and believed in heroes. There was our own Gordon Cooper and the Mercury astronauts, of course, world figures and sports stars. But it went deeper than that. It was more personal.
We took it that doctors healed and lawyers sought justice and teachers educated and policemen prevented crime.
However you remember the Kennedy years or the way we were then, it all seemed to change suddenly, irrevocably, on the 22nd, that day in Dallas. But what if it had not happened? What if Kennedy had lived? What might have been?
I think a lot of people really looked up to him and had a lot of confidence in him, and I think things would have been better.
We'd have had more. Maybe the black people would have a little bit more.
But would they? One theory holds that the civil rights legislation of the time might not have made it through Congress without riding the wave of remorse that followed Kennedy's death.
When Johnson succeeded him, and he carried on, and he probably got more things done that Kennedy tried to start than Kennedy probably could have done himself had he remained in office.
Much of the Kennedy mystique centers on the might have been. He was hope unrealized, promise unfulfilled. Had he stayed with us, hard realities may have taken a toll.
We may have made a hero out of someone who may not have turned out to have been a hero had things gone otherwise.
I think unless he got to be more on the ball in certain respects, I think that there would have been some degree of disillusionment.
Finally, we come to the biggest might have been of all, Vietnam. By November of '63, 16,000 military advisors were in country. 75 had already been killed. In Saigon, Buddhist monks burned themselves in protest. There were riots in the streets, and Diem's regime was doomed. The handwriting was on the wall, and one question haunts us to this day.
Would Kennedy have had the pragmatic sense, as many of his admirers believe, to cut the losses in Vietnam and get out before the huge commitment that happened in 1965 under Lyndon Johnson? Maybe he would have, and that would have avoided the most divisive thing in this country's history since the Civil War.
Of course, we'll never know, but it does make you wonder, doesn't it? Ron Trumbla, Channel 5 News.
Aqua golf? What is that?
Never heard of it. No, neither have I.
Aqua golf?
Never heard of it.
Aqua golf? Never played aqua golf.
What is it?
Aqua golf is simple enough. All you need is one of these, and a lot of that. Aqua golf is a screened-in driving range with waterborne targets and floating golf balls. Fort Worth's mayor was one of the first to tee off.
I hit it!
But there were a lot more where he came from, and the promoters of Aqua Golf were not surprised at the good turnout.
We noticed during the last week that many people came in, particularly from the Lake Worth district, and said they'll be back with their friends. Our experience has been here that anyone who's come in has loved it.
I enjoy it. It's fun.
I think it's great. I just think it's wonderful.
I think it's a wonderful activity for Lake Worth.
The golf range is just the first step in restoring Lake Worth's historic old Casino Beach area to some of its former glory. Ron Trumbla, Texas News 5. The protest and flag burning at the GOP convention in Dallas 6 years ago seemed to touch off a rash of flag attacks. This one in Austin struck the same bitter chord we've seen again and again in cities across the nation.
I'll show you violence. You ain't never seen nothing violent. Come back over here where I can get a hold of you.
It is political speech, and that we have the
legal right to do so. Do you know what the colors of this flag stand for, son?
Someone asked George Washington that same question back in 1777. He said red stood for courage, white for liberty, and blue for loyalty. And for some people today, the colors are all that and more. For retired Sergeant Major Herschel French, the flag has become his life's work. 9 years ago, City Hall proclaimed him the Flag Man of Grand Prairie. Ever since then, he has roamed the city on behalf of Old Glory.
Boy, I'd find them flying the flag wrong, and I'd say, hey, man, I said, you know, you're desecrating that Old Glory there, see? And I said, it's your flag, you bought and paid for it, but it belongs to the people of the United States.
Which is why Herschel and others like him have so much trouble understanding the bitterness of the flag-burning fight.
It represents all the people of the whole United States, because as far as I'm concerned, that's the way I feel about that flag, because it represents me, it represents you, and it represents you.
Ron Trumbla, Texas News 5.
No, they are good, and they're easy to pick. There's no stickers on them or anything.
Blueberry farming is less than 10 years old in Texas, and during that period, most of the sales were to people who like to pick their own. Or just buy them fresh from the farm. But that's beginning to change now, and so is the blueberry business.
All them little taquitos. Oh, a little bigger.
These berries will become part of a cooperative which is beginning to supply supermarkets in Dallas, Fort Worth, and other major cities. It's the latest step in a business that has seen rapid changes since the early 80s.
We were looking at somewhere total statewide of 50 acres of blueberries. Now we're somewhere up around probably between 1,200 and 1,400 acres.
What I like to try to do is grade these things while we're out in the field. That way you don't have to have that much trash when you get to the grading table.
The grading table is where they get rid of
the soft ones or the ones that are splits and have bug bites.
And sometimes there's red ones and green ones.
All of these berries will find their way to market under the label Texas Blueberries. And while the Lone Star State may be late in the business, we're told it will never be last.
Like as everything else, whether it be cattle or oil or whatever, we've got the best and the biggest in Texas, so we're going to have the best and the biggest blueberries, too.
If their luck holds and Mother Nature cooperates, Texas blueberry farmers may soon be looking at $1 million a year crop, a crop that could grow to $5 million during the next decade. Ron Trumbla, Texas News 5. Not long ago, GM's Arlington plant began turning out Caprice Classics. Early sales looked good, and this full-size Chevy seemed right on target with the buying public. And that was good news for all the Texans who depend on it.
We got a good product, good quality, and a feeling that it's going to go.
But that was before the gas prices started to rise. The question now is whether those prices will make buyers back away from Caprices and other big-engine models. Quite clearly, the answer is yes.
I would buy a small car that just motors around town easily, uses very little gas.
And no.
I just like driving a 350 engine, so it doesn't really bother me too much.
You're not going to run from higher prices?
I'm not going to run.
And maybe.
Driving a lot with $1.30 a gallon or whatnot, that's going to be kind of hectic on my budget.
Even with higher gas prices at the pump, the Big Classic will still have one advantage over its economy-sized competition.
It really doesn't start coming on real strong until about 4,000 RPMs.
That advantage is the people who know what they want and are ready to pay for it.
The people that buy your full-size cars, they've got the money to afford them anyway, so I don't think gas is going to be a problem to them.
And that is exactly what all these good people here in Arlington are counting on. Ron Trumbla, Texas News 5.